Good morning, everyone, and happy Wednesday. I am so sorry I cannot be with you live in class today, but I do have some fun practice planned for you in Buzz. So, first, you are going to start by reviewing our lesson outline for this week that is already available and ready to go for you to review on Buzz. So, last week we talked about supply and demand. You got to see how supply and demand will affect price level, and you also see what supply and demand look like when they are plotted on a graph. You got to see our supply and demand curves plotted together on the same graph. So today you are going to explore how supply and demand operate as functions. So just like anything else that can be plotted on a graph, supply and demand can be represented by functions. So in the supply and demand functions, you are going to be inputting the price. So the price is what you are inputting to the function, and then you are going to get the output of the quantity, so the amount. So when you are working with price and quantity values, so your P and your Q in the demand and the supply functions, those are the points that you are going to end up plotting on the supply and demand curve. So you will also get to practice that today. So first, let's explore a little bit about the demand function. So when we are representing the demand, we can use this function here. So we have quantity demanded is going to equal A minus B times the price point. So you see here, we are inputting a price point in order to get our output of the quantity. So in this case, the demand function, our quantity is going to be the quantity demanded. Our A value is going to be the quantity when price is equal to 0. So if our P were to equal 0, what is our quantity? And then finally, our B is how much quantity is decreasing when price increases. So that is going to be the rate of change. The key idea when we are working with the demand function is as price goes up, demand is going to go down. So you'll see an example here of working through the demand function and how we can plug in different price points to see the different quantity demanded at those price points. And then if we were to plot those points, we would get our demand curve that looks like this. Now remember, our demand curve is sloping downward, and that is because as price increases, less people are going to be demanding the item. So now let's take a look at our supply function. So if we are representing supply, we are going to use our formula here. So quantity supplied, QS, is going to equal C plus D times the price point. So again, we are inputting our price point to get our quantity as the output. So in this function, C is going to equal the quantity when the price is equal to 0. For supply functions, these numbers are going to be pretty small or even close to 0. And then our D is going to equal how much quantity increases when price increases. So again, that is going to be our rate of change, how steeply that line is going to be going up on our curves here. So again, you can see an example of how that supply function works. When we plug in our different price points, we are going to get the quantity supplied. And then if we were to plot those points, we would get our supply curve here. And our supply curve is going to be sloping upward. So the higher that sellers can sell an item for, those higher price points, they are going to want to supply and sell more of those items that they can sell at a high point. And the last thing that you're going to take a look at on these graphs is the equilibrium point. So this is going to be the price point where quantity demanded is going to equal quantity supplied. So if we were to graph both our supply curve and our demand curve on the same graph, our equilibrium point is going to be the point where those intersect. So you'll get to work through an example here of graphing both a demand and a supply curve. And then you're going to get to compare your graph to the result here and pay special attention to that equilibrium point. It will be marked on the answer of the final graph. Once you have gone through that practice, you are going to get started with practicing with BusyBee. BusyBee is going to be your graphing coach today. So they are going to give you a real life economic scenario that can be represented on a supply and demand curve. Then BusyBee is going to take you step by step through drawing a supply and demand curve to represent the scenario. So for each graph you work through with BusyBee, you're going to write the scenario, and then you're going to draw the supply and demand curve on a blank piece of paper. You do have to go through at least 5 graphs with BusyBee, and then you are going to submit a picture of your scenarios and the graphs on this class discussion page. So you will see that in the folder with all of this week's materials. And last but not least, you are going to complete your weekly assignment. Include any questions you have about the supply and demand functions. You all can also feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to answer any questions. I hope you enjoy the practice this week, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.